Hi and welcome to my podcast, the Fertility, Motherhood and Wellness Show, True Stories with Dr. Rajiv. Through this podcast, I will be dealing with issues related to fertility, safe motherhood practices, as well as women's health. I had recently done a podcast show where I had the proud privilege of having Dr. Apurva Pallam Reddy, an eminent gynecologist and fertility expert from Bangalore on the show, where we had discussed the finer nuances of egg or oocyte freezing. I have promised that besides just providing facts and figures and information on my show, I will from time to time also presenting true stories and inviting guests on the show. Guests who can add whole new dimension to our understanding of particular subjects. Today I have with me Ms. Nandini Khaitan. She's a litigation lawyer and a partner with one of the biggest law firms in the country. She has been practicing for 16 years now and is dual qualified to practice in India as well as New York. Thank you, Nandini. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you for having me. This is great what you're doing.
What is a litigation lawyer? I mean, do you help people litigate? I'm sorry for being so ignorant, but who is a litigation lawyer?
Basically, a litigator is somebody who basically goes to court. So any matter that goes to court, I'm the lawyer for that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for coming.
Very simply put.
Yeah, I'm sure it's more complicated than that. So thank you for coming to the show. Now, without wasting time, I normally find it very difficult to convince people to speak out on topics like, on even basic IVF. Patients who've conceived through IVF as well are very reluctant coming out and talking about things like these. And here is a topic of, egg freezing. Although it's socially relevant, but it's not well accepted. What made you say yes to come to the show?
Firstly, you, Doc. I think you make everybody very comfortable with everything. But there's a saying that be the change you want to see in the world. I really kind of believe in that. When I did the freezing, which was about 2 years back, I did not know anybody who had gone through it specifically. Right. I just knew people, this friends, that friend had done it, but no actual people to talk to. And I think, I did not want others to have the same experience if they were thinking about it. So right. I decided it's a good thing to speak about. So
absolutely.
That was the reason.
Point well taken. So why did you decide to freeze eggs? What gave you the thought suddenly?
The most obvious answer is I'm not getting younger. But A, that, and two was that because you're not getting younger, and I had PCOD. I have PCOD.
Right.
And I don't know when I will be in a position to think about marriage and babies.
Right.
And my understanding from a preliminary search was that conceiving becomes a little difficult later on with egg quality going down.
Right.
So I thought, why not just keep my options open later? If there is a problem, at least I'll have eggs frozen. So that was the main reasoning.
Absolutely, very valid point. And this is what Apurva and I had discussed in the last podcast that we did together. That unfortunately, unlike men, women are born with finite number of eggs and they keep using that every month. So whether you like it or whether you don't, those eggs are going to finish. And after the age of 30, especially after the age of 35, the numbers start declining rapidly. And if you look back at some point in time and say, I'm sorry, I've missed the bus. I should have done something differently a couple of years back. So that is where probably egg freezing comes in to help you. So this is still not a topic that many people know about. Where did you hear about it? Who told you about egg freezing?
Yeah. So Doc, before I answer this, I'll just go back to one point you made earlier. When I came to you for the consult,
right.
I still wasn't very sure I'd go through it. But what you said that, about having finite number of eggs and, the quality also deteriorating,
right.
That is actually what made me take the plunge. initially I had not come with any fixed mind that I will go through it when I came for the consult to you.
Right.
So that's something which I think a lot of women don't know, at least I didn't know. So if they know that, I think it will make a difference in taking a decision on doing this.
The reason I was asking you this also, sorry, you were saying something.
No, just that. And then I'll go back to the question you just asked.
Right. So, this is why the problem is people don't talk about it. Unfortunately, we doctors also don't come out that well in all our basic consults and say that, okay, there is something like this there. It's not that you have hoardings and advertisements all over the place or magazines are writing about it or stuff like that. So it's still something which is taboo and less heard of. So yes, please carry on.
Yeah. So you asked that how did I hear about it?
Right.
Frankly, I don't have a specific memory offhand that how did I come to know about it. I guess, people had just mentioned it in the passing as something they had heard of, have you considered it? But really, there was no specific thing that I read or had spoken to anybody. My sister Vasu and my cousin Isha actually got after me that, Didi, why don't you think of this? And till then it hadn't even, crossed my mind, frankly. But once they got after me, I started looking into it.
Right. And then I guess as we sat down and we discussed and, the entire conversation warmed up from there, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Till then it was just something I was exploring because they were, quite insistent on me looking into it.
So, right, you said your family, your Vasu was the one who spoke to you about these things. But yet, how did the family take to your decision of going ahead with this? I mean, did you one day sit at breakfast and announce saying, Dad, Mom, you know what, I'm doing egg freezing. Is that how it happened? Was the family all right with it? Because a younger generation understanding it, accepting it is different from another generation who probably hasn't seen this, finding it very difficult to suddenly comprehend with it. How did your family take it?
So I think if 2 or 3 people are on board with the idea, it gets easier to convince the rest. So in my case, my mommy Jyoti, who, when I told her this, she said, I will come with you for the consult. And then she also seemed convinced when, for the first consult.
Right.
So she also seemed convinced with what you were saying. And then my sister, of course, was very forward thinking on these things. My dad has always been a very liberal person.
Right.
He thinks that these are personal decisions of, people if they want to take it. So he seemed okay with it. My mother is a very, somebody who's a very naturopath kind of a person, so she was a little hesitant. But then she got on board when she saw I was serious about it.
Which is a point.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy for everybody,
right.
Because a lot of people think it's an elective procedure. So a lot of families may have sort of reservations from a lot of angles, stigma, or it's elective. Why do hormonal anything?
True.
But I think once you know your pros and cons, it's easy to sort of make people understand it.
Which is a point well taken, because even patients who are coming in with infertility issues who don't have a baby, yet when we talk about IVF to them, the first question which comes in, and I'm sure it is risky, it must be dangerous, and you're going to take out eggs, and I hope my wife is going to be all right, and she's going to put on this tons of weight, and you're going to be sticking needles into her, is she going to live, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of scare regarding the procedure, and for someone to accept an elective procedure for which you may not have an immediate need right now, I guess for the family also sometimes it can get very difficult. So if you thought about it, you heard about it, why did it take you so long to finally do this? Was it lack of information or just being shaky before taking the plunge?
Dog, this is going to sound very bad, but the absolute honest truth is I didn't prioritize it. I was too busy working.
Right.
And there was some hesitation in terms of injections, which most people are sort of scared of, and I'd heard that there are a lot of injections, especially with IVF, which is a lot more common. You hear women have to take a lot of injections, so that kind of makes you a little shaky, and also that you're going to be pumped with a few hormones, so that's a little sort of puts you on the little bit of a guard if you come from a family which is very natural, sort of into natural
oriented,
and all of those things. Yeah. Also, I think I was speaking to another friend of mine just a few hours before this conversation of ours, that single women especially are, I think, in eternal optimists. That next year or sometime soon they'll be in a relationship and they'll be able to do this naturally. So you keep putting it off कि नहीं कुछ तो होएगा life में, and you keep putting it off. But I think I eventually got to it once. I had spoken to you, and even then after I spoke to you also, it was 6-7 months when I finally got around to it. But really, the deciding factor for me was two things. One was that you said it was, you should do it ideally before 35.
Right.
And then you made me do a test which I think every single person should know about. Is it called the AMH? I'm not sure.
AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, yes.
So my understanding as a very lay person was that test really tells you whether your biological age as compared to your physical age is higher or lower.
Yes.
So mine turned out to be, and you told me तुम test कर लो, फिर करो नहीं करो you take a decision.
Right.
So once I did the test, I was 37 when I did the test, and my biological age was 34 when I did the test.
Right.
So that made me think that I'm still under the 35 sort of line, so maybe I shouldn't push my luck too much.
Right.
And if I do get into a relationship next year, then I don't have to really go through this. I don't have to really use the eggs. I can try for it naturally.
Of course.
If I have a problem because of PCOD or because a guy has an issue or whatever, we are just not lucky, then we can always use this. The idea was to just keep all options open and at the best time possible, which is, for me it turned out to be lucky that I was still 34 biologically.
Right. I think this just separates your fertility from your emotions. I mean, you don't really start, as I said in my previous podcast when I did with Apurva, that at one point in time women were told, you need to start going and grabbing husbands because I'm sorry, you're just about to miss the bus. Your age is now, you're over the hill and so on and so forth. This just tells you that at least is not an issue that you need to be thinking about. You get into a relationship or you have babies, whether you want to become a single mother or whatever you want to do in your life is your decision. At least your biological clock then has nothing to do with it.
Absolutely, that was the main driving force, that I have something in my control by freezing my eggs before. So that was the only reason that something is in my control.
Great. So we were talking about, I spoke about injections and people being scared of it, and you said as well that was a thought which was somewhere at the back of your head running through your mind. So how difficult was the process in terms of emotions, in terms of physical injections, those 9-10 days and the egg collection? How difficult was the process for you?
So Doc, I'll speak of it in two different categories, emotional and physical. And physical also, again, I'll divide it, being a lawyer, I have to be systematic. I'll divide it pre-extraction and post. So on the emotional side, frankly, I didn't have any issue. I'm lucky, I guess. But it also helped that I have a career which doesn't leave much time to think. So, it was just a part of the day, taking the supplements or the medicines that were there and, then the injections. So, I didn't really have much issues, too many issues on that front. And, if there were, if my family wasn't up to it or they were resisting, I would have maybe had more problems emotionally.
True.
But I think because they were all sort of okay with it, and I'm so busy on a regular basis that it didn't affect me emotionally.
Right.
Physically, I think my protocol, as you call it, started in December, and my extraction was end Feb. Right. So December to Jan to mid Feb, I had no issues because it was just medicines.
Right.
And I had told you, in the beginning that I'm very sort of sensitive to any medication. I almost always have side effects of loose motion, nausea and headaches. But you said that these were supplements and they shouldn't be causing anything. So I was lucky. Nothing happened with any of those. So the trouble really that I had was, if you want to call it trouble, was just the 2 weeks before extraction. Because I'm a lawyer, I had a lot of travel.
Right.
And you have to start coming for injections about 2.5, 3 weeks, I can't remember offhand,
Yes.
before the extraction. And I was traveling for a big case to Delhi every 4 days or 5 days.
Right.
So then, taking injections was going to be an issue. And
Right.
I also had to do scans, regularly,
Right. Yes.
which was also an issue. So here, to anybody who's hearing, I think your doc really needs to be superb. You were outstanding, doc, in accommodating my
Thank you so much.
profession, and I'll just tell you guys how he was great. And I'm not saying this because of any particular reason, more than that you should have that confidence in your doctor to be able to do this. So with me, he said that no worries, I'll give you prescriptions to carry these EpiPen type of injections with you how you travel. I will organize ice packs for you. I'll give you a letter to take it on the flight. When I was traveling in whichever city, he got me to have scans in those cities with doctors he knew and trusted. In fact, Dr. Apurva being one of them, and I'm a total fan of hers now. The only time I really freaked out with the injection was when I had to take it the first time. It was 1 hour before or 40 minutes before I had to go for a big court hearing. And I pricked myself, and there was little blood, and I absolutely
Bad time to
freaked
do it.
out. Yeah, no, but now I had timings, and I absolutely freaked out. But you and your clinic में Gauri were totally immediately available. I guess you also realize that I'm a professional who has these commitments, and you need to
Absolutely.
kind of address it.
Absolutely.
So you all told me that don't panic, it's just a prick, treat it like any other prick. So put a band-aid or put Dettol and just go ahead. And that's what I did. So yes, some of those injections were a little strange initially. They pained a little, but they were not painful.
Right. Right.
So that was fine. Extraction was no problem at all. It was very smooth. Doc did it in his chamber, in his clinic.
Right.
I think Saroj did the extraction.
Dr. Mukesh does the extractions, and
Okay.
Saroj, being the embryologist, looks after the eggs and the freezing and everything else. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Dr. Mukesh, I don't mean to take away the credit, but both of them, and you don't usually be you're not usually there in the room. I know.
Yes, but because I have surgeries in the morning, so sometimes, and these are procedures which have to be absolutely on time. And because I operate elsewhere as well, so sometimes in the mornings I'm not there, which is why I have a team
Yeah.
to look after things. Yes.
Yeah, but they did, but they were fab. They were really fab, and no problem. My problem was really post-extraction for the next 2 weeks. So your clinic did give me a what to expect chart post the extraction, and it did say I'll have possibly stomach pain or cramps, but mine were really extreme. I felt my stomach cramps, and
Right.
obviously my mom and my sister were panicking, and they really harrowed you. I know, I'm so sorry, but the stomach cramps were there for 2 days, and they were really bad, I have to say. But you gave me some painkillers which helped.
Right.
I also had some really extreme constipation also,
Right.
which really was very difficult for me. Because I usually have the other problem of having a quick metabolism, and
Right.
so I don't really have constipation issues. So I was very
Right.
uncomfortable with that. But I think my main problem was that I had some water in the stomach, I think.
Right.
For which I had to come in for scans again, which I
Right.
wasn't prepared for in terms of timelines because of
Timelines.
office and
Right.
court. And also you gave me some protein or something to
Right.
to drain
To ensure that you don't get you don't have problems with hyperstimulation. That's why we give you the proteins and medicines.
right. Sorry, I forgot
Yes.
I forgot the word. So basically
Yes.
to sukhaw the water, as you want to call
Yes.
it, or dry the water.
Yes.
So that had me bloating, constipated, which is not an issue. The problem really was to be on semi bed rest for 2 weeks. and that was something that I had not factored into my timelines with court and everything. So it was that was definitely an issue for me in a way that mentally and physically. But ठीक है, I mean, it's something that I had to go through and it got done. Nothing major that it was a huge issue.
Right. So just for our listeners, just to set the matter right, what we try and do is make lot many eggs in one go, so we can take out as many eggs as we can in one attempt. So the ovaries, which are so small, become much bigger. So say for example an ovary which is say 2 centimeters or so now becomes 6 to 7 centimeters, which makes the lower abdomen heavy, which can cause nausea, which can cause bloating, which can cause constipation. Plus there are a lot of hormones which are being released. So all this tends to give you a bit of a hard time. Again, it varies from person to person. Some people have a harder time than someone else. And also when we take out so many eggs, we do have a small percentage, 1 to 2% risk of something called hyperstimulation, wherein some problems can happen. But before those problems happen, we have to take certain measures by asking the patient to take certain medicines and a high protein diet, so that the chances of a complication happening is lesser. So although we are in most cases able to avoid the complication, the patient does have to go through all these, as Nandini is saying, medicines and bloating and etc. etc. The moment the periods come, all these issues disappear magically and then life becomes normal. But yes, a couple of days, till a couple of days after the collection, some people can have a lot of trouble.
Doc, I just want to add for listeners here that that protein thing was in the form of a drip.
Right. Right.
So it's like a channel has to be done.
Right. Yes.
And I am actually mortally afraid of those channels. So I think that is where my entire emotional quotient came in of being emotionally troubled, because it's one of those things I don't like channels because it hurts. But like a lot of people don't have any issue with channels. So for me it was more that than anything else.
Right.
But
so
yeah.
Nandini, coming to the point of freezing, you do understand that freezing eggs doesn't guarantee having a baby.
Yes, you made that very clear.
Right.
I was not doing it for any guaranteed baby this thing. It was just to ensure that I freeze eggs while they were still in quantity and quality better than what it would be in a few years down the line.
Right. So in the previous podcast as well, Dr. Apurva and I discussed this point, and this is something we keep reiterating to every person who comes in for such a procedure, because we don't want a misunderstanding tomorrow. This is an approved science. This is good. It's giving a lot of benefit to millions of women, but that does not mean that it can today ensure that when one comes back after a couple of years to have a baby, we are going to be able to guarantee having a baby with that many number of eggs that we have. If that was possible, then we could have guaranteed a baby to anyone who's coming in for fertility processes with us.
Yeah.
So this is an art and a science. Yes, please.
Sorry, go ahead. No, sorry, go ahead.
This is an art and a science with a bit of a luck factor involved. Luck factor only in the sense that we doctors still don't have knowledge about everything. The human body is hugely complex, and probably God wants to hold back certain things to himself or herself. And that is where the luck factor comes in. So barring that, yes, this is a brilliant process. You were saying something.
Yeah, I think the best way to kind of convince women to do this, who need to, is by saying this is the way of preserving a little bit of your youth.
Yeah, possibly, yes.
I truly think that's the case, right?
That is at least one aspect of your youth you can. We cannot make anyone younger by doing that, but at least one aspect, that is the whole aspect of motherhood. We can freeze that part. Yes.
This is small. I'm saying it's a small part of your youth being preserved. That's it.
Right. Okay. So I would now want to move away to a few more non-medical issues from here. So more and more women are thinking of delaying conception for one reason or another. In fact, this is something again Dr. Apurva and I had discussed, that with egg freezing, it's also something dangerous, because everyone then starts to think, oh, you know what? I've frozen my eggs. And even those who haven't are still delaying fertility for quite a few years now. Do you think this is a dangerous trend?
I'm not sure I understand, Doc. You mean to say that people are preserving eggs and
No,
hence
I'm saying
conception?
in both ways. So there is one group of people who are not doing anything, yet marrying late, and even if they are marrying early or late, they're still delaying conception for quite a few years because they have other commitments which they feel they need to prioritize. That's one aspect. So I'm asking you, is that a dangerous trend? Secondly, if one does freeze eggs, that also say releases you from the boundaries of biological aging, and you say, oh, you know what, I can come back at the age of 50 as well and get pregnant because my eggs are there, not understanding that there is a certain problem with conceiving or rather carrying the pregnancy at 50 as well. So if you get my question on both sides, so do you think women are going down a dangerous path, not medically but just socially? What is your thought process?
So Doc, second part first, I don't think anybody really, I mean in terms of sheer numbers or percentages, I don't think too many women really want to have a baby for the first time at 50 or 55. Right. And because obviously everything is a lot tougher then. To my head and to my exposure levels, I mean obviously you see a lot more women with this, but my exposure level is that people who are considering egg freezing, at least the single women who are considering egg freezing, are doing it more because they haven't gotten married and they don't know when they will. So they just want to kind of do this to keep their option open later in case of any issues.
Right.
I don't think, I haven't come across situations where people are doing it because they really want to delay their entire sort of life. I mean the biological clock starting later.
Right.
And everybody I think does know to a large extent that it's not just the eggs but your whole body also sort of you're getting closer to menopausal age or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So I think it will be difficult for my body to carry a baby at 45 as compared to 40 or even 35.
Chances of all complications are going to be higher at that time. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't think, at least not in my exposure, that I've seen this as an issue, that somebody deliberately delayed conception. With married people, I mean, I don't know if I can say anything in that regard, but again, I haven't seen too many married people delay conception beyond few years.
Right.
But if the question really is that people are doing it and is it a good thing, is it a good trend?
Right.
I think just scientifically, to whatever I understand as a layperson, it's better to have conception when your body is younger to be able to deal with things. So it's not about whether it's like you want to be independent or not. If you want to have a baby and you have the luxury of having it earlier, then why not?
Perfect. So this is the end of all the medical questions now. We now move on to the non-medical questions. So are there many women in your profession now? I mean, how do the women take to the rigors of your profession? I believe lawyers have all their briefs at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the night, 12 midnight and going on till wee hours of the morning. Is that how it is? And how do women then handle the whole stressful situation?
Doc, this is a really big issue in the legal culture for sure. In fact, I've written an article on this, and I've also spoken about women and law firms and the legal profession. There are 2 or 3 things in this. Calcutta especially is infamous for having late night conferences with counsels for matters next day in court.
Okay.
It's not that bad in terms of conferences with outsiders in Bombay, Delhi, Chennai to my knowledge. And of course Bombay I know because I lived there and worked in Delhi also. But the hours are very late, and it's, as far as I am concerned, I've had it a lot easier than most women because I'm single, so I don't have added responsibility of a child or a husband or needing to take care of a family. Very blessed to have had stayed with my Masi in Bombay and with my parents in Cal, who take care of everything. But a lot of women who are married or have children or are looking after big families and are lawyers, I know they have to struggle for time. So there is no two ways about it, and their health, especially anything elective like this, always takes a backseat. Somebody I just spoke to yesterday said the same thing to me that I told you just now, that she hasn't got around to doing egg freezing because she's too busy.
Right, right.
So I think women do have it a little difficult, but the biggest thing that came out of my conversations with women in the profession for my article and for my interviews online were that most women who managed it well was because they had a very supportive family.
I was just going to come to that. That family support, I think, in your profession would have to be fantastic. Otherwise,
Hugely.
For married women,
Huge.
especially, the family has to be very understanding.
Yeah, so a lot of the married women lawyers or even careers outside law, the women I spoke to, they in fact loved the fact that they lived in a joint family or with in-laws or with their parents when they were married, because they knew that the children were taken care of, or they didn't have to rush back home.
Right.
You'd be surprised to know that if I may take a minute to just say this.
Of course.
A lot of people I know who've had very lucrative careers in Bombay and Delhi, lawyers, have
Right.
actually moved back to Calcutta to live with their parents here because they felt that they could manage work here easier with living with family.
Right. Understood. Perfect.
So it's definitely an advantage.
Still going off the track even more, and one of my favorite topics, you're, Nandini, you're eloquent, you're intelligent, successful, careerist, and in a profession where you rub shoulders with and have to prove your mettle to a profession dominated by men. What is feminism to you?
Doc, firstly, I want to tell the listeners I didn't bribe him at all for saying those lovely things. Nothing at all. So I'm very, very embarrassed, and thank you for those lovely words. Yes, it is an old boys network in the profession, definitely. But I think my firm is very meritocratic driven. So even if you're a woman and you're doing well at your work, you will be sort of looked at equal levels and measures with the boys.
Right.
But having said that, there is a definite old boys network sort of situation that happens in courts and in conferences and stuff. But it's changing because the sheer number of women who are coming into the profession is now a lot more. Harvard in 2016 had more number of women's law students than men, and
Right.
India also was equaling that same number. So when the number of women increased in the profession, the infrastructure and the mindset has to sort of expand to accommodate the new entrants. So it's a changing landscape, I would say.
Right.
And as far as feminism is concerned, Doc, I don't have any intellectually stimulating answer to give you. I think it's a function of how your family and friends are around you to a large extent also.
Right.
My family, especially my parents, are very liberal minded. Education is a huge sort of big thing in their minds. So to me, if I really have to sound intelligent while saying this, I would say that it's the freedom to make your own choices. And egg freezing being a small part of that, but again, it's a part of making a choice for yourself. So to me, feminism is simply making your own choices.
Right, perfect. Why I asked you this question as well is because I sometimes feel that feminism is being taken to another level altogether. I know we are digressing from our topic totally, but when it comes to men and women being equally paid, men and women being equally considered in jobs, etc., I do understand that. But I think somewhere it's a whole new ball game. It's probably a product which is, I feel, sometimes being marketed with a lot of aggression. In fact, that Pitra Satta poem speaks more about women discriminating against women than the men of the world. So I do believe that sometimes women have more trouble with the women of the world than with the men of the world. So that also brings me to the next point. Sorry, you want to add something?
No. Yeah, so the Indra Nooyi, who's the erstwhile Pepsi CEO, she's always said this, that exactly what you are saying, that women sort of sometimes need to back women more than what they do. So that's definitely a huge factor in this conversation. But I still think that that if men are not included in the conversation, the change will be a lot more delayed.
Right. You're also a very avid reader, Nandini, and you, in fact, are writing articles on social media about good books to read and encouraging people to read and to bring back this whole culture of reading, which seems to be a lost art. So, is it a lawyer thing? I mean, that since you have to read so much, or is it just you, or do all lawyers read a lot?
So there is this thing that we say in our profession that all lawyers are readers, but all readers are not lawyers. No, I mean lawyers, as far as their profession is concerned, obviously they have to read a lot, and it goes hand in hand, in fact. But it doesn't mean that lawyers read outside their work. A lot of lawyers I know can't. I don't want to read anything when they reach home or when they are traveling, because they read so much during the day. They can't bear to see a book or a written word there. But that's a personal choice, right?
Right. True.
For me, I never played with dolls. I had no interest in any of the very these kind of activities while I was a child. I always read books. So it's a way of life for me, and it's the best way to sort of expand your mind, get exposure, and it's the best way to also develop empathy, especially by reading fiction, because you're put into characters' minds and their hearts, and you sort of see how they look at things. So if you want to have a holistic way of looking at things, and I always say if you want to sound smart, then reading books is a really good way of doing all of these things.
You always get some good pick-up lines from the books.
Well, I don't know about that. I haven't used them. I'm still a little traditional that way. I would prefer them being used on me.
Right.
I guess I'm being anti-feminist when I say that. But no, I think books really help you really open up your mind more than anything else in this world.
So Nandini, before we finish, we'll still go even more off track. You also have a love for poems, especially Hindi poems. Let's hear one of your favorite ones.
Doc, I don't think too many of your listeners are interested in hearing me recite a poem. If they would rather hear you recite a poem.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Okay, done. But Doc, I was just remembering something. If you don't mind, can I ask you one more question? That
Of course.
That one of my friends and me were discussing yesterday. I spoke to her that I'll be talking to Doc about this, and she had a question, which actually, even frankly, I did not realize while doing extraction, and now I think most people will be interested. One, on the cost factor.
Right.
And two, how long can the eggs be frozen for? And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. When I did the extraction, I knew the whole cost of the procedure.
Right.
What I had not mentally prepared, and not from any lack of you telling me, but what I had not mentally prepared was for the cost of the freezing every year, the annual cost.
Right.
That how it's going to be charged and all of those kind of things. And also, I still, at some level, didn't think of how long can it be frozen for, because I hadn't really thought when will I need to use it. But she had this very specific question, and I realized I didn't have an answer. So if you don't mind, could you just address them, and then we'll go back to the poem.
Right. So as far as the cost of the procedure is concerned, the cost of the procedure is in three parts. One part is the professional fees which is charged by the organization, which is usually about 65,000 rupees. The second cost is the cost of the injections and the investigations which are done during the procedure, which adds up to almost about, I would say, 90,000 to a lakh of rupees. So you're looking at a cost of almost about 1.5 to 1.6 lakhs of doing the procedure. The third part is of, say, freezing the eggs and keeping it frozen for the longest possible time. So the cost of freezing the eggs would put you back by, I would say, about some, depending on, of course, the number of eggs that one has, say about some 20, 30, 35,000 rupees, again, depending on the number of eggs. And to keep it frozen, again, depending on the number of eggs one has, I would say anything between 20 to 30,000 rupees per year. So that would be a recurring cost which one has to bear every year. So that is what is the cost coming to.
No, I think in my case it's a lot higher every year because the number of eggs that you were able to extract was a lot more than expected, I guess.
Right. So the more number of eggs we have, the cost is obviously going to go higher.
Yeah.
As far as how long?
Can we keep it? Yeah.
So
sorry.
The freezing process keeps changing. This current freezing process, which is called vitrification, has been around, I would say, the last 6, 7, 8 years now. So we have knowledge only for that time. But in these 7, 8 years, we've understood that if we freeze 100 eggs, and when you take them out, almost 95 to 98 of them do well. And we've also understood that whether you freeze them for 1 minute or 1 year or 5 years, it doesn't change because they are in suspended animation. It's almost like the science fiction movies where this astronaut gets into a pod and one day Mars arrives and the pod opens and the astronaut comes out looking as young as ever. So it's almost a similar concept that the eggs or the tissues or the cells go into suspended animation, and when awakened, they will be just as fresh and as same as when they were frozen. So currently I would say 7, 8 years, but our knowledge, unless technology changes, would be even 10 years, 15 years or more.
Okay, thank you. That kind of clears it up in my head also.
Perfect. Now can I hear a poem from you?
I still think they would prefer it from you, but sure. So, poetry for me is as much a passion as reading books is. And I like English poetry as well as Hindi poetry actually. Okay. But my favorite poem is Madhushala by Harivansh Rai Bachchan ji, which I'm sure a lot of people know. I will recite the first para, which is not recited as often as it should be according to me. So here it goes, Doc.
Right.
मृदु भावों के अंगूरों की आज बना लाया आला, प्रियतम अपने ही हाथों से आज पिलाऊंगा प्याला, पहले तेरा भोग लगा लूं फिर प्रसाद जग पाएगा, सबसे पहले तेरा स्वागत करती मेरी मधुशाला. And that was from memory, not reading anything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nandini, for the poem, for your thoughts, for bringing so much to the show, for that very candid discussion, and for being so honest with everything that you've said. I know it comes straight from the heart, and I've known you long enough for me to know that and believe that. Thank you so much for being here. It's honestly a pleasure and honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. To all the listeners out there, make sure your dog rocks as much as mine did.
This brings me to the end of yet another podcast episode, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you do get a chance, look up my website www.drrajivagarwal.co.in and the associated blog. I also have a YouTube channel in my name. Do email me on fertilitywithoutborders@gmail.com if you have any queries or if you want me to create a podcast on any topic of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple and Google Podcast as well as Spotify. Do subscribe and leave your comments and suggestions on the Apple Podcast app. That's the only way we can make this better. Looking forward to great interactions. Keep listening.